You've pumped so much humour into what naturally seems like a very painful, a subject that elicits so much emotion in people, the slave trade. What was it about that subject in the beginning that made you want to kind of embrace it as a subject matter for a book?
I've always been interested in slavery, but I didn't want to do the kind of thing that most people expect. I wanted to look at a particular moment in history, which is the transatlantic slave trade, and find a way to write about it so that people would look at it differently. And the idea I came up with was to reverse it or to invert it. What if it's the Africans who enslaved the Europeans? And the way in which that connects to the present is that a lot of how we view race in our society goes back to the racist theories that came out of the transatlantic slave trade. Because racism about black people, as we know it, did not exist before the slave trade began. So what hopefully the book is then doing is looking at notions of savagery and civilization, because we all know that Africans have been considered savages and still are to some extent, and Europe is considered civilized. So by turning it on its head, whereby the Europeans are the uncivilized ones, hopefully people will look at it afresh.
Thinking of writing a book about the slave trade, an easy subject, but you have made it so complex and so interesting and so imaginative. Was it that a kind of a battle for you? Was it that challenge, or did it come quite simply as something you've been pondering for years and then you just popped it out like that first baby?
It's never like that, I can assure you. I spent about a year researching the slave trade and not knowing how I was going to approach it. And one of the things that really inspired me was I went to the University of London Senate House Library, and they've got these pro-slavery tracts which you can call up on microfiche. And they're written by these men in the 18th century in defence of slavery. And their tone is very reasoned and very civilised and very educated, and they're coming up with all these reasons why slavery should exist and why it's not as bad as people think it should be, and etc. And I was totally outraged by these tracts. And when I began writing the book, I was going to write about from the slave master's point of view. And somehow that got lost, I think, because I didn't really want to write the slave master's point of view. I wanted it to be about somebody who goes through the experience of it. So that was my way into it.
Among women writing about the slave trade, The Colour Purple and Beloved are two really big early books. They end with the kind of possibility of hope and redemption. Because your slave communities in the West Japanese islands show in their behaviour patterns things we recognise from society today, that you are perhaps suggesting that the traumas of slavery haven't resolved themselves. I mean, it seemed to me that under the humour there was perhaps a kind of bleaker take on things.
Yeah, really, I think you're absolutely right. I think there are lots of issues that have come down through the generations.
I thought that was actually a real strength within the novels.
I don't really believe in happy ever afters, and this book couldn't have it really.
Why Ambossa?
Yeah, I experimented with names and it just sounded African. And it's, oh yeah, I know why. Ambossa. Ambossa.
Well, I talk to many filmmakers, and you ask them whether they have this sense of responsibility when they're creating their work about their audience and the kind of impact that their books or their work's going to have. Are you mindful of that when you're working or when you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, I have my own sort of morals and sense of equality, and you know, I have my own political views and opinions, and I let that guide me with my writing, but I don't try to pander to hate the term, but anyway, to political correctness. So there is a lot of irreverence, I think. There is partly in this book, and also in some of my other books, which, you know, I was wondering, like the whole thing about black women and weight, for example. Everybody went quiet when I read it. I was thinking, you know, people are going to take offence to that because I'm talking about this, for example, this African doll with big butt, big lips. You know, some people say, oh, that's really offensive. Well, no, it's not really, because it's just like the opposite to the Barbie doll. So that's what I'm playing with. So I feel that, yes, I do feel a sense of responsibility, but I won't let other people censor my work, if you like. So I'm not writing for a particular audience, because once you start writing for a particular audience, they become your censors.
Did you have personal ambitions about what you wanted people to get out of the book, or did you just kind of think it was just one of those subjects that people are going to?
Well, I just want people to think about it differently. You know, because when people talk about slavery, they say, "Oh, we've done slavery." Even before last year, "Oh, we've done slavery." Well, we haven't. Really, we haven't. How many fiction books have there been produced in this country which explore slavery? Hardly any. You know, name me 2. But people have this idea, it's been done. You know, people get very emotional about it, they get very defensive, they get very angry, they get very dismissive, very judgmental. You know, a whole range of emotions are thrown up when you talk about slavery. And so what I want people to do, well, step back, look at it differently, and then see what you think of it.
In what ways did it affect you? If you...
Well, I think, you know, the second half of the book gets quite sombre, has to, and, well, the first half too. So, you know, in order to write about difficult things, if you want to write characters who have an emotional world, then you have to go into your own emotions. So it's quite difficult writing some of it, because you have to imagine it, and one doesn't want to imagine certain things. So yeah, so that was something.
I'm curious about the way you've turned all the names into, you know, you've paraphrased the names, and of course if we're based in London, you know, eventually go, oh yeah, I get that, that's Edgware or that's Paddington, etc. Curious about how long that process took for you, or was that a bit of fun during the process of writing?
Yeah. Didn't take long at all.
Yeah. I love it actually.
Edgware, Mifar. You know, those ideas when they come, they're just there, and you just play around with them, you know.